The White House is pushing back on reports the president was aware of allegations Russia paid the Taliban to kill U.S. troops. Officials say he was not briefed because the intelligence wasn't, quote, verified. Natalie Brand has the latest from the White House.
The White House insists President Trump was not personally briefed about allegations Russia paid bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. troops until reports went public this week.
The president has been briefed on what is unfortunately in the public domain because of the New York Times and the irresponsible leak. Yes, he has been briefed, but that does not change the fact that there is no consensus on this intelligence that still has yet to be verified.
Several news outlets are reporting the intelligence was included in the president's daily written report.
What did the president know, and when did he know it? However that was communicated to him.
A senior White House official declined to say if the report was in a daily briefing, but added actionable intelligence gets briefed to the president and is acted on an as-needed basis. Oftentimes, things in the presidential daily brief are deemed not to be actionable.
CBS News has learned the president's national security aides debated the intelligence. The CIA believed the bounty reports to be true, while the National Security Agency still had doubts.
Democrats say the president should have been briefed, even though there wasn't a consensus opinion.
There may be a reluctance to brief the president on things he doesn't want to hear, and that may be more true with respect to Putin and Putin's Russia than with respect to any other subject matter.
Both sides in Congress agree the U.S. must take action if Russia issued bounties on Americans.
Any targeting of U.S. forces by Russians, by anyone else, will face a very swift and deadly response.
Lawmakers from both parties say they still have a lot of questions. House Democrats say they would like to hear from the heads of the intelligence agencies involved. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
For more, let's bring in Michael Schwirtz. He's an investigative reporter for the New York Times and part of the team there that's been reporting on this story. Michael, thank you very much for being with us. What more can you tell us about how this intelligence was actually obtained?
Thank you for having me on. As we reported today, American officials have intercepted electronic data that shows large financial transfers from a bank account that intelligence officials believe is controlled by Russia's military intelligence agency to a Taliban-linked account. This is evidence in support of the conclusion that Russia was providing these bounties for killing U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and it comes on top of other intelligence that we're told that intelligence officials received from interviews with detainees who had been captured in various operations in Afghanistan.
What has been the Taliban's response to these accusations?
The Taliban has flat out denied that they had been taking money from the Russians or from anybody else to carry out their operations. They claim that that the war that they are waging is their own, and they have not received any outside help from others, which we know, frankly, to be not true. The U.S. has publicly accused Russia in the past of providing both material and financial support to the Taliban. This is just what appears to be an escalation of that support by actually offering bounties to specifically target U.S. troops.
Is there any indication here what Russia's motivation was in paying these alleged bounties to kill U.S. troops?
This is one of the bigger mysteries because nominally Russia supports the peace process that the United States is engaged in with the Taliban as part of the Trump administration's effort to withdraw troops fully from the country. However, we've heard a number of theories as to why Russia might be doing this, whether that might be part of a hedging strategy, trying to curry favor with the Taliban in the case that they eventually do take power after the United States leaves. We've heard about the possibility that this could be revenge for attacks by Americans on Russian troops in Syria in particular. But we have yet to really learn, I think, or have a concrete assessment of what, in fact, the actual motivation might be for this.
As you know, the White House denies that the president had ever been personally briefed on this matter. What did you find in your reporting?
Right. We're aware from a number of sources that this information about the bounties was included in the president's daily brief in late February. We don't know whether or not the president read that, and we know from previous reporting that, in fact, he does not always read the president's daily brief and often has his briefings done orally. What we don't know is whether somebody actually told the president that this was in his daily brief, and whether this was discussed on the presidential level as far as developing some kind of a response to the Russians.
And to be clear, for people who may not know, you're talking about a piece of paper, essentially, right? This is something that the president gets, as the name would imply, every day. It's a piece of paper that has sort of the threat matrix for that day. And what you're saying is that that was, based on your reporting, that was, in fact, part of that PDB.
That's correct. This information about the bounties being delivered by Russia to the Taliban in order to kill American troops and coalition troops, that was in this president's daily brief. Now, what we know is that the president does not always read this daily brief. And so whether, in fact, he was aware that it was in there is still unclear.
So as we heard, both Democrats and Republicans say that if the allegations are true, that there needs to be a tough response to Russia. Is it clear what that might look like?
It's hard to say. In the past, when Russia has engaged in these kinds of malign activities, you've seen additional sanctions added. Russia's already under sanctions for the invasion of Ukraine in 2014 and the annexation of Crimea, a peninsula in the south of Ukraine. There additional sanctions were placed on Russia after the 2016 election meddling. So that's certainly an option. Expulsion of diplomats is certainly an option. At times, something as simple as the president of the United States going to the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and saying "knock it off" is sufficient to get these sorts of activities to stop. But as far as we know, no decision has been made on a response, or whether even to issue a response as a result of these revelations.
And more broadly, Michael, how could this intelligence about Russia impact talks to end the war in Afghanistan?
That, I think, is still unclear. The United States, this is a key foreign policy initiative of this president, and we know that these talks are underway. There's been some hiccups, but since the start of the year, after an agreement was signed, I believe in February, there haven't been any attacks on American troops. The president wants to get this done. The Taliban say they want to get this done, and so it's unclear whether this will have any sort of impact on that. One suspected that it might, should these assessments by the intelligence community bear out.
All right, Michael Schwirtz for us. Michael, an extraordinary bit of reporting. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.